My future mother-in-law gave me a list of rules for our wedding. The last rule changed everything. The day my fiance, David, and I got engaged, my mother-in-law-to-be, Vanessa, gave me a hug that was all bone and perfume. She whispered in my ear, "Welcome to the family, dear. We have so much to plan." I felt a chill then, a small, cold snake of unease slithering down my spine, but I dismissed it as pre-wedding jitters. I was wrong. What followed wasn't just planning. It was a slow, calculated unveiling of a legacy I was being asked to marry into. It started with a single, unassuming email containing a family traditions document. By the end of that document, I wasn't just questioning the wedding. I was questioning everything I thought I knew about the man I loved and the family I was about to join. I still remember the way the afternoon light slanted through the windows of our apartment, catching the dust motes floating in the air like tiny stars. David was at his desk, sketching out a new logo concept, his brow furrowed in that way that made him look both serious and adorable. I was curled up on the couch with a wedding magazine, flipping through pages of floral arrangements and cake designs that all seemed to blur together after a while. We had been engaged for 3 months, and I was still floating on that cloud of giddy happiness that follows a yes. The ring on my finger felt like it weighed nothing and everything at the same time. David was my person. The one who made me laugh until my stomach hurt, who brought me coffee in bed, who held my hand during my thesis defense and squeezed it so hard I thought my fingers might break. He was steady, kind, and utterly devoted. I had never doubted for a second that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. His family, though, was a different story. I had met his parents, Vanessa and Richard, a handful of times before the engagement. They lived in a sprawling house in the suburbs, the kind with manicured hedges and a driveway that could fit 3 cars. Vanessa was always impeccably dressed, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. She asked polite questions about my studies, my job, my family, but I always felt like I was being assessed, like there was a checklist being ticked off in her mind. Richard was quieter, a man who seemed to exist in the shadow of his wife's commanding presence. He would nod along to her conversations, offering the occasional gruff agreement. David was an only child, which I knew came with its own set of pressures. He was their sole focus, their pride and joy, and I had always suspected that no woman would ever be good enough for him in Vanessa's eyes. I brushed those feelings aside, attributing them to my own insecurities. After all, David had chosen me. He had proposed to me on a rainy Tuesday evening, down on one knee in our messy living room, his voice trembling with emotion. That was all that mattered. Then came the email. It was a Thursday morning, and I was juggling a coffee mug and my laptop, trying to get some work done before a meeting. My phone buzzed with a notification from Vanessa. I opened it, expecting photos of potential venues or a link to a catering service she had recommended. Instead, there was a subject line that made my stomach drop: family traditions and wedding protocol. I opened the attachment, and what I found was a document, meticulously formatted, running to 6 pages. It was titled The Barrett Family Wedding Guide. I remember laughing at first, thinking it was a joke. Maybe Vanessa was being quirky, trying to make me feel included. But as I started reading, the laughter died in my throat. The document was a list of rules, not suggestions. Rules. Rule number 1, the wedding venue must be at a specific location: the Barrett family estate, where generations of Barretts had exchanged vows. No exceptions. Rule number 2, the guest list would be curated by Vanessa. I could invite up to 20 people from my side, but every other name required her approval. She noted that she would be vetting each guest to ensure they were appropriate company. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I scrolled further. Rule number 3, the wedding cake had to be a family recipe that had been passed down for 5 generations. No substitutions, no modern interpretations. It was a fruitcake, which I despised. Rule number 4, I was to wear the Barrett family heirloom veil, a piece that was over 100 years old and, according to the document, had been worn by every bride who had married into the family since 1920. I was told that my mother's veil, the one I had dreamed of wearing since I was a little girl, would not be appropriate. Each rule felt like a tiny pinprick, deflating the balloon of joy I had been carrying around. I read through rules about seating arrangements, about which florist I was permitted to use, about the exact wording of the vows. There was even a rule about the wedding toast, specifying who could speak and for how long. I was so engrossed in this bizarre document that I didn't hear David come up behind me. He wrapped his arms around my shoulders and kissed the top of my head. "What are you reading so intensely?" he asked, his voice warm and familiar. I didn't know how to respond. I just pointed at the screen, my finger trembling slightly. He leaned in, and I watched his expression shift from curiosity to confusion, then to a sort of weary resignation. He wasn't shocked. That was the thing that broke my heart the most. He looked like he had seen this before. "Rachel," he said softly, pulling away from me. "I should have told you. My mom, she has ideas about how things should be. She's been planning my wedding since I was a kid. It's just how she is. Just how she is?" I repeated, my voice rising. "David, this is insane. She's telling me what I can wear, who I can invite. She's telling me to get rid of my mother's veil." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit I had seen 1,000 times. "I know it seems like a lot, but I promise you she has good intentions. She just wants everything to be perfect. It's a sign she cares." I stared at him, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. "This isn't caring," I said slowly. trying to keep my voice steady. This is control. This is her trying to plan our entire wedding without any input from me. He sighed, a long, heavy exhale that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of appeasing his mother. Look, just let me talk to her. I'll handle it. She'll back off. She just needs to feel included. I wanted to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe that this was a simple misunderstanding, a one-time overstep that could be smoothed over with a calm conversation. He was the man I loved, the man who had never given me any reason to doubt him before. So I nodded. I agreed to let him talk to her. He called her that night. I sat on the couch, picking at the loose thread on a throw pillow, trying to listen to his side of the conversation. I heard him say things like, "Mom, it's a little much," and "Rachel has her own ideas too." But then his voice would soften, becoming placating and gentle. "Yes, I know you mean well. Yes, I know it's tradition." When he hung up, he gave me a triumphant smile. "See? All handled. She said she'll call you tomorrow to go over the venue." He didn't look at me when he said the last part. He was already walking back to his desk, his shoulders slumped with relief. And that's when I knew he hadn't handled anything. He had just made me the next person in line to be managed by his mother. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, listening to David's soft breathing, replaying the rules in my head. The worst one, the one that had lodged itself like a splinter in my mind, was the last rule. It was written in bold, underlined, and set apart from the rest. It read, "The bride must formally renounce all ties with her own family name and adopt the Barrett family's traditions in their entirety." I didn't understand what that meant. Renounce? Not just changing my last name, which I had planned to do anyway, but renounce. It sounded so final, so absolute. I got out of bed and crept to the living room, opening my laptop to read the document one more time. The words blurred on the screen and my hands were shaking. As I reached the final page, I realized there was a hidden page. I expanded the document, and there, at the very bottom, was the last rule in its full, detailed glory. It wasn't just about my name. It was about my family, my parents, my siblings. It stipulated that from the moment I became a Barrett, they were to be considered extended guests at best, and that all major life decisions, including those regarding my own future children, would be subject to family vote. A vote, I knew without asking, that Vanessa would control. I sat there in the darkness, the cold light of the screen illuminating my face. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would change, that I had somehow misread it, but they didn't. I had officially become a traditional Barrett bride, a role that required a total surrender of my identity. I looked at the closed door of our bedroom, the door behind which my fiancé slept peacefully, believing everything was fine. I realized I had a choice to make, and I had a terrible feeling that whatever I chose, I was going to lose something precious. The next morning, I was still sitting on the couch when the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds. My laptop had gone to sleep, the screen dark, but the words from that document were burned into my retinas. I hadn't moved for hours. My coffee sat cold and untouched beside me, a thin skin forming on its surface. David emerged from the bedroom around 7, rubbing his eyes and yawning. He stopped when he saw me, his expression shifting from sleepy confusion to mild concern. "Rachel, did you sleep at all out here?" I looked up at him, this man I had pledged my life to, and I felt a gulf opening between us. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his mother's expectations. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. "I read the document again," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "The whole thing. Every page." He sighed, that familiar weary sound that was starting to grate on my nerves. He walked over and sat down beside me, close enough that I could smell his familiar scent of sandalwood and sleep. "Rachel, I told you. I'll talk to her. She'll come around." "Did you read it?" I asked, turning to face him fully. "Did you actually read what she wrote?" He shifted uncomfortably. I skimmed it. "You know how my mom is. She gets carried away with details. David, she wants me to renounce my family, my parents, my sister. She wants me to agree that every major decision in our future lives will be subject to a family vote. A vote that she will obviously control." "Did you skim past that part?" His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I saw a flicker of genuine surprise. "Renounce? That's not what she meant. She probably just worded it poorly. You know she's not great with phrasing. She's a retired English professor, David. She knows exactly how to phrase things." He was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. I watched him process this, watched him try to reconcile the mother he loved with the mother who had written those words. I could almost see the mental gymnastics happening behind his eyes. "I'll talk to her," he said again, but this time his voice lacked conviction. "I'll tell her she needs to change that part." "Change that part?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "David, this isn't a negotiation. This isn't a draft document we can edit together. This is her telling me who I'm allowed to be. This is her trying to erase my entire identity before I even walk down the aisle." Okay, he said, holding up his hands. "You're right. I hear you. This is too much. I'll call her right now and tell her the whole thing is off. No rules. We plan the wedding however we want." He was saying all the right things, but there was a hesitancy in his voice that made my stomach churn. He was placating me, just like he placated her. I had seen him do it 100 times with Vanessa. Give a little ground here, make a small concession there, never actually drawing a line in the sand. "Promise me," I said, grabbing his hand. "Promise me you will tell her that this is not acceptable, that if she wants to be part of our wedding, she needs to respect me as an equal partner in this marriage." He met my eyes and nodded. "I promise. I'll handle it." He made the call from the bedroom, closing the door behind him. I stood in the hallway, pressing my ear against the wood, straining to hear his words. At first, his voice was firm. I could hear him saying, No, Mom, this is too much. Rachel is upset, but then his tone shifted, softening into that placating rhythm I had come to dread. I know you meant well. No, I understand it's tradition. Yes, I know you just want what's best for us. The conversation went on for 20 minutes. By the time he emerged, his face was a mask of forced optimism. She's agreed to compromise, he announced, as if he had just negotiated a historic peace treaty. She'll take out the part about renouncing your family name, and she's willing to let you have more input on the guest list. That's it? I asked, my voice flat. Those are the compromises? She's still controlling the venue, the cake, the veil, the vows? She's trying, Rachel. She's been planning this day for 30 years. You have to understand, this is hard for her. She's letting go of her son. I felt something inside me snap, a thread I hadn't even known was holding me together. She's not letting go, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. She's holding on tighter, and you're letting her. I grabbed my purse and walked out of the apartment. David called after me, his voice desperate, but I didn't turn around. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to be anywhere but in that apartment, suffocating under the weight of a family I hadn't even officially joined yet. I drove to my sister's house. Beth was 2 years older than me, sharp-tongued and fiercely loyal. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without a word, pouring me a glass of wine and sitting me down in her sunny kitchen. Spill, she said, crossing her arms. So I told her everything. The email, the document, the rules, the hidden last rule, the conversation with David, the non-existent compromise. Beth listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening with each word. When I finished, she set down her wine glass and leaned forward. Rachel, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. I don't think you should marry him. I blinked, stunned. What? Beth, I love him. I know you do, she said gently. But love isn't enough when your partner can't stand up to their family. David is a good man, but he's a pushover when it comes to his mother, and that's not going to change. If anything, it's going to get worse. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right. I had known it since the moment I read that document and saw David's weary resignation instead of righteous anger. What should I do? I whispered. Beth reached across the table and took my hand. You need to set a boundary, a real one, and then you need to see if he respects it. If he doesn't, well, then you have your answer. I stayed at Beth's house for the rest of the day, ignoring the flood of texts and calls from David. He sent apology after apology, each one more desperate than the last. I read them all, but I didn't respond. I needed time to think, to figure out what I truly wanted. When I finally returned to the apartment that evening, David was waiting by the door. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, even though it had only been hours. Rachel, please, he said, his voice cracking. I talked to her again. I told her everything needs to change. She's agreed to give us full control of the wedding. I swear. I studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. He seemed sincere, but I had been fooled before. And what about the family vote? What about my family being considered extended guests? He swallowed hard. She's willing to reconsider. She said she'll think about it. Think about it? I repeated, my voice rising. She'll think about whether my parents are allowed to be part of my own wedding. Rachel, please. Just give her time. She'll come around. I walked past him into the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, sitting on the coffee table, was a large cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in Vanessa's elegant script. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, a formal, beautifully written letter that began with the words, "Dearest Rachel, I understand you have concerns about our family traditions." As I read the letter, I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't an apology. It was an invitation to what Vanessa called a private family consultation at her house the following weekend. A meeting where, she wrote, "We can discuss the terms of your integration into the Barrett family in a more personal setting." The word terms echoed in my mind. Terms. Like I was negotiating a treaty. Like I was applying for a position. Not becoming part of a family. There's more, David said quietly, holding up another document. She emailed this too. She's been preparing for weeks. He handed me his phone and I looked at the screen. It was a contract, a literal legally formatted contract with blank spaces for my signature. The document was titled, "The Rachel Barrett Integration Agreement." I stared at it, my mind reeling. I turned to David, tears streaming down my face. "Did you know about this? Did you know she had a contract ready?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. No, he whispered, but there was something in his eyes, something that looked a lot like guilt. I didn't know, I swear, but she has mentioned it before, a long time ago. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I looked back at the phone, at the cold, clinical language of the document, and then I looked at David, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, who was now standing helplessly as his mother tried to legally bind my identity. I made a decision in that moment, a decision I knew would change everything. "Call your mother," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "Call her and tell her we're coming to that meeting. But I'm not going there to negotiate. I'm going there to tell her exactly what I think of her integration agreement." David's face went pale. "Rachel, what are you going to say?" I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision settling over me like armor. "I'm going to tell her that I'm not signing anything. I'm not marrying into a family that wants to erase who I am. And if that means I'm not marrying you, then so be it." The drive to Vanessa's house that Saturday felt like a funeral procession. David sat beside me in the passenger seat, his hands clenched in his lap, his jaw tight. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick and heavy, filled with everything we had left unsaid over the past few days. I had spent the week preparing, not preparing to negotiate as Vanessa clearly expected, but preparing to stand my ground. I had rehearsed my words in the mirror, practiced keeping my voice steady when every instinct told me to scream. Beth had coached me, reminding me that I wasn't asking for permission. I was setting a boundary. Vanessa's house loomed before us, pristine and imposing. The hedges were perfectly trimmed, the driveway immaculate. Everything about it screamed control and order. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I parked the car. "Rachel," David said, reaching for my hand. "Please, just let me do the talking. I can fix this." I pulled my hand away. "No, David, you've had your chance to fix this. Now it's my turn." He looked hurt, but he didn't argue. We walked up the front path together, and I noticed his steps were hesitant, dragging slightly as if he didn't want to be there. I couldn't blame him. I didn't want to be there either, but I had to be. I had to see this through. Vanessa opened the door before we could knock. She was dressed in a cream-colored blouse and tailored trousers, her hair swept back in an elegant bun. Her smile was warm, practiced, and utterly insincere. "Rachel, darling," she said, pulling me into a hug that was all rigid formality. "I'm so glad you came. I knew you would see reason." I didn't return the hug. I stood stiffly in her embrace until she pulled back, her eyes flickering with momentary surprise. She recovered quickly, ushering us into the living room where Richard was already seated, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He gave me a tight nod, his eyes darting away almost immediately. The coffee table was laid out with refreshments, tiny sandwiches, a pot of tea, delicate china cups, and in the center of it all, the contract, the integration agreement. It was printed on expensive paper, bound in a sleek black folder. Vanessa had made it look official, professional, as if she were offering me a job rather than a life. I sat down across from her, David hovering awkwardly beside me before taking a seat at my side. Vanessa and Richard sat together on the opposite sofa, a united front. "Thank you for coming," Vanessa began, folding her hands in her lap. "I know this has been a difficult week for everyone. David has expressed some of your concerns, and I want to assure you that I have no intention of making you uncomfortable." I waited. I knew the words were coming. The carefully crafted speech designed to make her demands sound reasonable. "I know the document I sent seemed formal," she continued, her smile never wavering. "But I truly believe that setting clear expectations is the foundation of a healthy family. We Barretts have always valued tradition and structure. That's what made us strong." "Strong?" I repeated, my voice quiet but steady. "Or controlling?" The smile flickered. "I beg your pardon?" "Vanessa," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I read your document. I read it multiple times. I read the contract your son showed me. And I need you to hear me when I say this. I am not signing anything." David shifted beside me, but I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes locked on Vanessa, watching her carefully constructed composure start to crack around the edges. "I'm not renouncing my family," I continued. "My parents will be at my wedding, and they will be treated with the same respect as anyone else. I will wear my mother's veil, not a 100-year-old heirloom that doesn't belong to me. I will choose my own cake, my own flowers, my own venue, and I will make decisions about my future children with my husband, not with a committee." Vanessa's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Rachel, I don't think you understand. These traditions are what make this family what it is. They've been passed down for generations. Your children will be Barretts. They deserve to inherit the same legacy. I'm not asking my children to inherit a legacy," I said. "I'm asking them to inherit love and respect and the freedom to be whoever they want to be." Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably, but Vanessa shot him a silencing glare. She turned back to me, her smile gone now, replaced by something colder. "You're being unreasonable," she said flatly. "You come from a different background. I understand that. You don't understand how these things work in a family like ours." I felt the sting of her words, the casual dismissal of my entire history. She was right about one thing. I didn't come from money or status. My parents were teachers. We had a modest home, family dinners on Sunday nights, and a deep, unshakable love for each other. I had always thought that was enough. Vanessa was telling me it wasn't. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't understand how things work in your family. And honestly, I don't think I want to." David stood up abruptly. "Mom, stop, just stop. This isn't what we talked about." Vanessa looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something like contempt in her eyes. "David, please sit down. The adults are talking." That was the moment everything shifted. I saw David's face change, saw the years of appeasement and placation fall away, leaving something raw and angry behind. "No, Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to dismiss her like that. Rachel is my wife, not my girlfriend, not a stranger you can evaluate. My wife. And if you can't respect her, then maybe we don't need to be part of this family." Vanessa stared at him, stunned into silence. Richard looked between them, his mouth slightly open. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, something I hadn't felt in weeks. "Hope. You're choosing her over your own mother?" Vanessa asked, her voice cold and brittle. "I'm choosing my partner," David said firmly. "I'm choosing the woman I love. And if that means we walk away, Then we walk away. He held out his hand to me. I took it, squeezing tightly. Together, we walked out of that pristine living room and out into the sunlight. I thought I would feel relief, but instead, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. We had just cut ties with his family, possibly permanently. The weight of that decision pressed down on me as we drove home in silence. That night, we sat in our messy, imperfect apartment, eating takeout from the cartons. The ring on my finger felt different now, lighter somehow, less like a chain and more like a promise. Are you okay? David asked, setting down his chopsticks. I thought about the contract sitting on Vanessa's coffee table, about the grandmother I had just walked away from, about the wedding that now had no venue, no plan, no certainty. I don't know, I admitted, but I think I will be. He reached across the table and took my hand. We'll figure this out, together. No committees, no contracts, just us. I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. We spent the rest of the night talking about our future. Not the wedding, not the guest list, or the flowers, or the traditions, just our life together. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an email from Vanessa. I opened it with trepidation, expecting another document, another attempt to control. Instead, I found a short, curt message. I apologize for the misunderstanding, it read. I want my son to be happy. If you need time to plan things your own way, I'll respect that. But know this, you are not marrying just David. You are marrying into a legacy, and legacies don't disappear just because you refuse to sign a piece of paper. I stared at the words for a long moment. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a real concession. It was a warning, a reminder that she would always be there, always watching, always waiting for me to slip up. I showed it to David. He read it, sighed, and set the phone down. Are you scared? He asked quietly. I thought about the wedding, the dress, the flowers, the family I would be joining, the mother-in-law who would never truly accept me. Terrified, I admitted, but I'm not going to let that stop me. 6 months later, we got married in a small garden ceremony. My parents stood beside me, both of them beaming. Beth was my maid of honor, and she cried through the entire ceremony. David wore a simple suit, his eyes never leaving mine. Vanessa came. She sat in the back row, her expression unreadable. She wore a conservative dress and a thin smile. She didn't approach me until the reception. Congratulations, she said stiffly. The ceremony was lovely. I met her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. Thank you for coming, I replied. She nodded, then walked away. It wasn't the relationship I had hoped for. It wasn't a warm, loving mother-in-law who would embrace me as a daughter, but it was a start, a fragile piece built on boundaries and respect. Later that night, David and I stood on the balcony of our hotel room, looking out at the stars. I'm proud of you, he said, wrapping his arms around me. You stood your ground. You didn't let her change who you are. I leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Neither did you, I said. You stood up to her. You chose us. He kissed the top of my head. Always. I should have done it years ago. I should have set boundaries long before you came into the picture. But I was too scared. I thought I needed her approval. Sometimes the hardest thing is realizing you don't, I said. He was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking, he said eventually. I know you wanted a bigger wedding, a traditional one, with all the family and the flowers and the dinner, and now you have this instead. A small ceremony, no big party. Are you disappointed? I turned to face him, truly look at him, at the man who had stood up to his mother for me, who had chosen love over legacy. This is exactly what I wanted, I said. I didn't want a spectacle. I didn't want a contract or a committee or a family vote. I just wanted this. You, me, us. He smiled, and the light in his eyes was brighter than any chandelier or floral arrangement could ever be. The years that followed weren't always easy. Vanessa never fully accepted me, but she learned to keep her opinions to herself. David and I built our own traditions, our own family, our own legacy. One based on love, respect, and the freedom to be exactly who we were. And sometimes on quiet nights, I would think back to that document on Vanessa's coffee table, the integration agreement that had threatened to erase everything I was. I would think about the courage it took to walk away, to refuse to sign my identity away. I never regretted that decision, not for a single moment, because I didn't need to be integrated into the Barrett family. I needed to build something new, something that belonged to us, and I did.